Spring is here and I am so ready to start decorating my outdoor decor on my front porch as well as my sun deck. To start, I'm going to be creating some unique upcycled planters for my outdoor decor. Let me show you how. I got this wood chest for $3 from the thrift store. You can see it's seen better days, but it's such a unique piece. It's got a really thick lid to it. You can definitely tell it's a homemade piece. I'm just sanding it down a bit because I want to refinish it. I'm going to wipe off the dust. Now, something I like to do is use gesso on my projects. Gesso is a primer that artists use on their substrates. So I like to use it on all kinds of different projects, but then I realized I'm like, oh wait, I need to remove the hinges before I carry on. So I did that, set the hinges aside, and now I can prime my surface. Now this is if you are going to be using some craft paints. I'm going to coat the entire surface inside and out with my gesso. You can give it 1 to 2 coats and then allow it to dry. Now this is the Artist Loft brand. I get it from Michael's and it's a nice smooth consistency and it dries really, really nicely. Now you can go ahead for this project, use outdoor paint. I didn't have any, so I wanted to try out using craft paint. You can see that my project is all nice and dry. I'm using some Arteza outdoor acrylic paint. I'm going to mix it with some warm white craft paint. I'm going to add the Dijon color and the titanium white. Now, I found out I thought I had a lot more titanium white and I didn't have enough for this. I was trying to create a warm white color because this is what I wanted to paint my piece. So I thought, okay, well, let me try adding some warm white to this. And it was still too yellow. I wanted to really soften it up. So I'm like, well, I wanted to really make this paint durable anyway. So I was adding some of my gesso to the mix. And I was also hoping that this would lighten it up enough, but it still wasn't light enough. So I thought, well, I'm going to just continue to mix it up here, adding some more gesso as needed and trying to get some more of the acrylic paint out of the bottle as I can. And then I thought, well, since it's still not quite right, I'm like, I'm just going to give this piece a coat of this yellow paint anyways. It's going to be lighter than the dark brown that was on there. And if anything, what this is going to do is just help provide some durability since this is going to be going outside. It has the outdoor acrylic paint along with the gesso, so it'll just make it, like I said, more durable. So I'm going to go ahead and give the entire piece a coat. I'm concentrating on all the seams, making sure I've really got good coverage there. And then I'm going to allow this to dry well. So I had set my top and bottom aside, allowed them both to dry, and they're good to go now. I'm gonna be using up some scraps of like leftover paints in my tubes here. It's just my craft paints. I'm gonna mix it with some gesso. I'm on this mission to use up some of my bottles that just have little bits of paint left in them. I discovered that when I was cleaning up, I had way too many little bottles like that. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna just clean them up before I buy some new ones. So you can see I mixed some gesso in with this. And now I'm going to go ahead and cover up that yellow. And you can see the coverage is really, really nice. I did give 2 coats of this warm white mixture that I have, and that gave really, really nice coverage. The gesso helps this paint to really thicken up more, so then you get better coverage out of it. It works great with craft paints. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm getting all the different sides. One thing you could do if you want, you could create like a crackle finish. So you could leave the dark yellow and apply like some glue and then put the lighter color on top and it would really create a fun crackle effect. But I wanted just this whole piece to be this nice warm white color. I've allowed the 2 coats of the warm white to dry. Now I'm going over top and I'm applying 2 coats of some matte varnish that's put out by DecoArt. The varnish is a permanent varnish. You could use some polyurethane, whatever you want to use. You just want to make sure that this is going to be really durable for the outdoors. So I've allowed the 2 coats of varnish to dry. I'm just clearing out the screw holes here because now it's time for me to put the hinges back on. So I'm going to just go ahead and start off with the lid. I found that it was easier to start with the lid, and you want to make sure you put your hinges on properly. I've discovered I had them on upside down, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start to put those back into place. So once I've got the 2 hinges started, I'm going to now line it up with the bottom. Make sure you've got all your holes lined up, and then you can start to screw the hinge onto the bottom. And that will just help you to make sure everything's all good and lined up and ready to go. So the hinges are attached. Now you can see that the lid is really heavy, so I'm just putting a container underneath that to help hold it up. You can use a plastic bag or some kind of a container to line the box and fill it up with dirt, and then you can plant some succulents in there. This would make a great planter for succulents. Now, it's too early for me to plant some real plants. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this and what it'll look like with succulents using some artificial. I use some dry floral foam and I just placed it inside. I didn't glue anything. And then I'm going to start to put the succulents into place as well. You can glue the succulents and the foam into place if you'd like, if you want this to be a faux centerpiece. But I do plan on taking this apart when the time is right and fill this with some real succulents. Stay tuned on my community tab. I will post that picture once I am able to plant some real stuff for the outdoors, but we're still getting frost here where I live. So I thought, I still want to get prepped and ready to go for the planting season. So I wanted to give you the idea of what this is going to look like. I've filled it up with the succulents, and now I'm going to add some Spanish moss. I would do this even with some real succulents as well. I really like the look of it trailing out from underneath the succulents. I think it just creates such a really organic look. I don't know, there's just something about it. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, and then you can set it outside. Now keep in mind, depending on the supplies that you use, whether or not you need this to be undercover or not, but mine's going to go out on the sun deck, and I love how it turned out. Let me know what you think down below. I had bought a plant from Walmart and it came with this pot, and to be honest, I wasn't crazy about the pattern. I wanted to create a nice rustic little pot using this jute cord that I got from Dollarama. Dollarama is a Canadian dollar store, but you can get jute rope anywhere. This is a thicker one. I just had to trim off just the scrappy end. I'm now going to use some hot glue and I'm going to apply it really nice and tight to the bottom edge. I wanted to make sure that it was covering up the white right up down to the bottom edge. You could add some little feet by adding some wood beads to the bottom of this pot if you'd like, but I wanted to keep mine nice and flat at this point in time. That might be something I'll do later on. So I'm just going to continue to glue on the rope. Once I get to the end here, I'm going to angle it up, and then I'm going to continue on adding some rows of the jute twine. It becomes so much easier at this point. The glue is adhering to this pot nicely. I really like that. You could just paint this pot that's got texture on it if you'd like, but like I said, I wasn't too crazy about the pattern, so I wanted to create a new little planter for outside. I think a little succulent would look so cute in this pot. So at this point, I was originally going to just cover this with jute twine, but I'm about almost 3/4 of the way up here. I decided that I wanted to add something different to the top. So I'm just going to trim off the excess at this point and just glue that little bit in. You can see that I trimmed it off on an angle and then I glued it down into place. So I decided to use some bark. This is cherry wood. My husband had gathered it. He likes to use cherry wood in his smoker. And he got this from an orchardist. He had to remove his old growth trees, and this makes great wood for smoking. But you can see I'm like, oh, the bark on here is kind of cool. So I'm trying to get it off. It did not come off very easily, but I was able to get enough off for my project. It looks like it holds up really well because, as you can see, it wasn't really coming off. But I'm curious. This is the first time I've used cherry wood bark. So I'm curious to see how well it's going to hold up. So I'm just going to apply it using some hot glue. Now the hot glue you want to use is Gorilla hot glue. It is very durable and it works well for outdoors. You could also use a combination of some silicone glue. So you can see I added little pieces, and I'm just going to trim off any of the excess, and you're going to kind of puzzle all your pieces together. Trim any of the pieces off so it fits onto the pot a little bit better, and then you can go ahead and just using your hot glue gun, apply that to the top of the pot. Now I should have maybe added a bit of paint to this before covering it up, but I was able to cover it up with the bark so that you couldn't see the white showing through where it is. But I really like creating some natural decor using natural elements and creating something more rustic. So I think this is just such a fun and unique piece. So I'm just coming up to the end here. Again, just trimming off any excess and filling in any of the little pieces using the little bits that I had left over. So I'm really loving how this looks, but I don't like the white rim. It just stands out too much. So I'm going to use some Arteza outdoor acrylic paint in brown, and I'm just going to apply that to the rim. Once you have a plant in this, I don't even know if you're going to even be able to see this, but I thought just in case, I'm just going to cover it up, and then I know that it's not going to show. I'm just going to go all the way around the edge, and I'm also going to apply some the inside as well. I went down about 1 centimeter, and then I'm going to set this aside and allow it to dry, and then it's ready to be used. Such a fun and unique piece, and you're definitely not going to see anything like this anywhere else. This one is taking your trash and making an outdoor treasure. I have got this old coffee can, and I'm going to punch some holes in the bottom for drainage. You can fill it up with rocks as well. I decided I wanted to cover this one with some birch bark. Just trimming off the bottom so that the end of the birch bark is nice and flat, so it'll fit around our tin and sit properly on a flat surface, cleaning up some of the debris on the inside. Now, for those of you who may be new here, I forage a lot of the things that I like to craft with for my nature crafts. And so this is one of those things I love to forage. I will have a new upcoming forage video for you soon. But in the meantime, I've got some foraging videos for you down in the description box, as well as pinned in the comments for you to check out. So I cut this tube in half because it didn't fit quite properly. I'm going to be using some Gorilla Glue, but you can use some Gorilla silicone as well for this project. I'm going to just start to wrap the tin with this birch bark, adding some glue here and there, and then just rolling the tin into the birch bark so that there's good adhesion between the bark and the glue. You want to make sure you sit and hold that glue and birch together until it sets, and then you can continue to wrap it. You may need to trim your birch bark down so then it fits a little better. I am going to just trim off my edge here, and I'm going to make sure that the end butts up against the other edge really nicely. If it's not perfect, that's okay, because we're going to be covering up that seam anyways, which I'll show you how to do here in a bit. So I'm just going to go ahead, add a little bit of extra glue here to make sure that seam stays nice and smooth. Now you can see it's not fully covered, so I've got some other scraps that I'm going to use to start puzzling it all together to cover up the tin. If you're concerned about the shininess of the tin showing through your bark, you can definitely paint it first if you'd like. I'm just using, again, just my hot glue to adhere all the pieces. I've got so many nature crafts here on my channel. In fact, I've got compilation video that I had put together for all of you to check out. So that will be linked at the end of this video, as well as pinned in the comment section and the description box. Here you can see that I'm going to cover up the seam. I'm just using some little pieces. I'm also going to use some other random pieces just here and there, just to create more of a rustic and unique look instead of just a flat surface. I think all these little bits just add a lot of unique texture to this planter. So once you're happy with the coverage, you can then take your scissors, just trim off the ends if anything else is hanging over the edge. That way here again, it'll sit nicely on the surface that you are going to have this planter, and then you can fill it up. Again, I'm just going to use some faux greenery at this point because it's just too cold outside still to put some real plants, but you get the idea. I love this. It's such, again, a very unique piece. This is such a cool little wooden wheelbarrow, but honestly, I'm not too crazy about the painting on here. It's kind of dated and it doesn't go with anything I've got going on. My mom got it for $6. I'm gonna give this piece a coat of the gesso as well. Again, we want this outside. This one is for sure gonna be undercover, so I don't have to worry about the rain so much, but I still wanted it to be really nice and durable, so I decided to go ahead and use my gesso. You can, of course, use some outdoor household paint if you'd like, but just like my previous little wood project, I wanted to use up some of my supplies. I've had them kicking around for too long and it's time to use them up. So you want to make sure you get every little spot with your gesso to seal it all up. If you're concerned about water getting in between any of those crevices, use some wood sealer to seal all those seams. But I filled in those seams with the white gesso. And like I said, since it's going to be undercover, I didn't have to worry quite as much. But if I had it out in the elements, I would definitely seal this up with some wood sealer. Don't forget to do the underside as well. I'm going to be using a mix of some burnt umber craft paint, and it wasn't quite dark enough. So what I like to do is add just a touch of some black paint, and then I'll mix those two together and it creates a much darker brown color. Now you can see the gesso is all nice and dry. I'm going to go ahead and apply that really dark, rich brown color over top of the gesso. I'm going to cover almost the entire piece. I did not need to do the inside of this wheelbarrow as well as the direct underside. I'm going to be doing a technique to this, and I won't be doing that technique on the inside since you're not going to see that part. So I'm now going to mix some of my paints together here. I'm using up some more of my craft paints. I've got this leaf green color and I'm going to be mixing it with some of the leftover warm white. And then I will be adding the gesso to this mix as well. So I'm really happy with this color. I'm gonna give the wheelbarrow a coat of this beautiful green, but this is where I decided to add the gesso again to make this more durable and give the paint better adhesion. So I'm gonna just mix that up. It did end up lightening up that green a little bit more. And now I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the wheelbarrow. So the brown paint is all nice and dry. It's really important to make sure that that paint is dry before you do this next step. Now I'm going to go ahead and go all over the piece with the green paint. And again, you want to make sure you allow it to dry well. You can see I don't have the inside with the brown paint, but I didn't need to do that. I did give this piece 2 coats of the brown paint in spots, not every spot, but most spots. You can see here the wheelbarrow is all nice and dry. Now I'm going to take a sanding block and a combination of sanding paper, and I'm going to start to distress it. The dark brown color is going to start to show through. The more you work the surface, the more of the brown color is going to come through. I know you've probably seen this technique a lot, but I really like the look of this. I think it just makes the piece again look very unique and rustic, but I don't know, I think it also gives it kind of like an old farmhouse look, like something that you would find in the old farmyard kicking around. I'm making sure to target the handles as well to make those wear marks. So for another added touch, I'm using this Vintage Effect wash in the color white. This is put out by CreArtive. I'm just putting some on my surface, using a dry brush, stippling some of it off, and then dry brushing it onto the surface. This is going to create more of a weathered look. This is actually something I haven't tried with this product before, so I wanted to see how it worked, and I was actually quite pleased. It added just enough color to make it look weathered, but not too much to take away from the green color as well as the sanding technique that I did. You can see that effect right there. So now I'm going to cover it up, giving it 2 coats of my matte varnish by CreArtive. And I'm really focusing in on those seams again, just making sure it's good and sealed, but this again will be undercover. Now I find that when you use varnish, it really helps the aging techniques, the sanding, and the color, the dry brushing to really pop. It just really brings those effects to life. So I'm gonna apply those 2 coats of the varnish and then let it dry. Now for another added aging technique, I am going to use some archival ink in the color potting soil, and I'm going to add some of it just to the edge. Again, just another added aging effect, something I love to do, and archival ink is permanent, so you don't have to seal this up. Just using a makeup sponge to apply it, using a brush to kind of smooth it out, or use my fingers. This is something I love to do. I'm all about the detail in projects, and I think it definitely works for this piece. Again, I'm making sure I'm adding some to the handles to make it look like dirty hands have been in the garden working it and left some dirt on those handles, but you can see how good that looks. I think this is such a fun and unique piece. Let me know what you think down below. I have a ton of unique outdoor decor ideas in this video right here. Definitely want to check it out, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.